I want to tell you about one of the worst professional moments I have had. I prepared a presentation for 3 weeks. I knew the content deeply. I practiced it multiple times at home. And when the day came, everything went well for the first 4 minutes. Then, someone asked a question mid presentation. It was a fair question. I answered it. But when I tried to get back on track, I had completely lost my place. I could not remember where I was. I could not remember what came next. And I stood there in front of 12 people, rebuilding from nothing.
And what made it worse was that you knew the content. The problem was not knowledge, it was losing the thread.
Exactly. I had all the information, but the moment the structure fell apart, I had nothing to hold on to. I ended up jumping around between points, repeating things I had already said, and eventually stopping early because I couldn't find my way back to the ending I had planned.
Welcome to Career English Lab, where we help international professionals communicate more clearly, more confidently, and more professionally at work. Today, we're looking at how to give a presentation in English without losing your place, without freezing under pressure, and without falling apart when something unexpected happens. I'm Maya.
And I'm Leo. Presentations are one of my biggest challenges, and I know I am not alone in that. Let's get into it.
The first thing I want to say is that most presentation problems are not vocabulary problems, they're structure problems. When you know exactly what comes next, unexpected questions and nerves become much easier to manage. But when your preparation is based on memorizing content rather than following a clear structure, any disruption can knock the whole thing down.
That matches my experience exactly. I used to memorize my presentations almost word for word, and memorizing is fragile. If one piece slips, the rest can follow.
Right. The problem with memorizing is that it gives you one path through the content. The moment something pulls you off that path, you have no map to get back. What you need instead is a simple framework you can navigate under pressure, like a skeleton that holds everything together no matter what happens around it.
And I think for people presenting in a second language, the pressure to memorize feels even stronger because you're not just worried about the content, you're worried about the English too. So you try to control every word, and that over-preparation becomes the fragile point.
That's a really important observation. Presenters working in the second language often carry twice the cognitive load. They're managing the message and monitoring the language at the same time, which is exactly why having a clear structure matters even more for them than for a native speaker. When the structure is solid, you free up mental space that would otherwise go to remembering your next sentence.
So structure isn't just organization. For non-native speakers, it's actually a confidence tool.
Exactly. And once people experience that, they usually never go back to full memorization. The framework I use is what I call the 3 signposts. Every strong professional presentation fits inside 3 sections. The first signpost is the situation. Why are we here, and what is the current state of things? The second is the insight. What is the key point you want people to understand or take away? The third is the action. What do you want people to do or decide as a result?
That's simple enough to remember even under pressure.
That's the whole point. When you know your 3 signposts, you can find your place again at any moment. Even if a question takes you somewhere unexpected, you always know which signpost you were on and where you're going next.
Can you give an example of what that looks like in practice?
Of course. Imagine you are presenting a proposal for a new client onboarding process. Your situation might be, our current onboarding takes 14 days and clients are reporting confusion in the first week. Your insight, the main issue is that clients receive too much information at once and have no clear guide for the first few days. Your action, you are recommending a structured 3-day welcome sequence with one dedicated contact person. That is your whole presentation in 3 sentences.
Which means if I lose my place, I can always ask myself, have I covered the situation? Have I shared the insight? Am I still on the way to the action?
Exactly. It acts like a compass. No matter what happens, you always know where you are.
And I imagine this also helps with nerves before you start because you're not trying to hold 50 things in your head, you're holding 3.
Yes. The night before a presentation, instead of reading through every slide, spend 10 minutes saying your 3 signposts out loud until they feel completely natural. If you can say those three things clearly from memory, you have the whole presentation covered, even if the technology fails or you lose your notes.
What about the opening? Because I think the first 30 seconds are the hardest part of any presentation. Once I'm in flow, it gets better, but that initial moment feels like the highest pressure.
People almost always make the opening harder by adding too much to it. They thank everyone for coming, introduce themselves at length, and summarize everything they're about to cover. And by the time they get to any real content, they've already lost energy and attention. A stronger opening is one clear sentence that tells people exactly why they should listen.
Like a hook.
Exactly. Something like, today I want to share one reason why our onboarding process is costing us client trust in the first week and what I recommend we do before next quarter. That sentence creates interest, establishes relevance, and promises a payoff. People lean in.
Versus opening with, "So, thank you for having me. My name is Leo, and today I'm going to be talking about some findings related to the onboarding experience and a few suggestions I wanted to share."
Which signals uncertainty immediately. A one-sentence hook signals that you know what you're doing and that it's worth their time. Let's hear both versions clearly.
Weak version. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. So, my name is Leo, and today I'm going to be talking about our onboarding process and some things I notice in the data, and also a few thoughts about what we could potentially do to improve things going forward.
And the stronger version?
Our current onboarding is losing client trust in the first week. I want to show you why and what one change could fix it.
You're in the room from the very first word. And notice that the stronger version is shorter. Confidence in presentations doesn't sound like more words. It sounds like fewer, better chosen words.
Let's talk about handling questions mid-presentation, because that's exactly what caused my worst moment. What's the right approach when someone asks something in the middle?
There are two types of questions. The first is a quick one you can answer in a sentence or two. For those, answer directly and then use an anchor phrase to return to your flow. Great question. The answer is X. So, as I was saying, that anchor phrase is the key. Without it, you can easily stay in question mode and never find your signpost again.
And the second type?
A deeper question that needs more time. For those, park it professionally. That's a great question, and I want to give it a proper answer. Let me finish this section and I'll come back to it. That parking phrase is so useful. It's not dismissing the question, it's honoring it while staying on track. Exactly. And most people respond very well to it because it signals professionalism and genuine engagement rather than avoidance.
What about the moments when you lose your train of thought mid-sentence, not because of a question, just because nerves hit and the next word disappears? What do you actually say in that moment?
Recovery phrases. Every presenter needs a small set of these and needs to practice them until they feel completely natural. Things like, let me take a step back here, or what I want to highlight is, or to put that simply, or the key point here is, these give your brain a half second to catch up while you sound composed on the outside.
And they work because they sound like a natural part of how a confident person speaks, not like someone who just forgot what they were saying.
Right. The goal is that nobody in the room realizes you needed that pause. They just think you are choosing your words carefully, which, in a way, you are.
One more thing before we recap. What about the ending? I have noticed that even strong presentations can fall apart in the last 30 seconds because people trail off instead of finishing clearly.
The ending is more important than most people realize because it's the last thing your audience hears and the thing most likely to stay with them. A weak ending sounds like, and yes, so that's basically everything I wanted to cover. I think that's it. Does anyone have questions? A strong ending states clearly what you want people to take away, or something like, the one thing I want you to leave with today is this. One small structural change in week 1 of onboarding can significantly reduce early client drop-off. I recommend we pilot this next month and review in 6 weeks.
Clear, direct, and purposeful. It sounds finished rather than abandoned.
Exactly. End with intention. Your last sentence should sound like a full stop, not a question mark.
Let's recap what we covered today. First, move away from memorizing and towards a clear structure used at three signposts: situation, insight, and action. They act as your compass so you always know where you are even when something disrupts you.
Second, the night before your presentation, say your three signposts out loud until they feel completely automatic. That preparation gives you a foundation that holds even if everything else goes wrong.
Third, open with one clear, purposeful sentence that tells people why they should listen. Do not warm up in public.
Fourth, manage questions with an anchor phrase to return to your flow, or a parking phrase to hold deeper questions until later.
And fifth, keep recovery phrases ready so that moments of lost thought sound like deliberate pauses rather than gaps.
And end with intention. Your last sentence should leave people with a clear takeaway or a clear next step.
This week's lab challenge: write your three signposts for a presentation or update you have coming up. Just three sentences: situation, insight, action. Share it in the comments if you want feedback from the community.
Subscribe to Career English Lab and share this episode with a colleague who has a presentation coming up soon.
I'm Leo, and
Maya.
thinking back to my story, if I had had those three signposts, I might have actually made it to my planned ending. See you in the lab.